Good day and welcome to this SolarPower Europe webinar, The Potential of Solar and Storage in Sub-Saharan Africa. I am glad to see good level of participation today on this very exciting session. But before we start, I would like to kindly thank our partner, GET Invest, who has supported the organization of this webinar. GET Invest is a European program which supports investment in decentralized renewable energy. The program targets private sector business and project developers, financiers, and regulators to build sustainable energy markets in developing countries. Services include market information, a funding database, matchmaking events, and access to finance advisory. This program is supported by the European Union and the member states, Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands, and Austria, and works closely with initiatives and business associations such as in the energy sector. I'm delighted to welcome all attendees that we have today and to introduce today's topic. So as a background, as a solar PV association, we are really excited to see how the African continent is looking with increasing interest as solar technologies. The solar potential in Africa, as you know, is immense, thanks to high irradiation on the one hand and strong demand. But yet the installed capacities in the continent represent less than 1% of the world's solar capacity. So last year, in our 2020 Global Market Outlook, we dedicated one specific chapter to the analysis of this region, the Sub-Saharan solar market. We understood that by 2019, Sub-Saharan Africa reached a total installed capacity of 3.8 gigawatts, with annual installation doubling compared to the previous year. We expect a strong increase in installed capacity over the next few years, and actually, our central scenario forecast that Sub-Saharan Africa will add 21 gigawatts of solar between 2020 and 2024. So against this background, interest is also growing around battery storage as a key enabler of the energy transition. Batteries, in fact, provide all the conditions that are vital for maximizing the use of variable renewable energy sources, thanks to the provision of flexibility and grid reliability services. So considering the large synergies that we see between solar and storage, we expect massive investments in these two technologies in the coming years. In this webinar, we will get insights from several local and international experts about the deployment of solar and storage in the Sub-Saharan African region. And I'm much looking forward to hearing about the current state of play of solar and storage business cases and to discussing barriers and drivers to further development. So if we look at today's agenda, we have 1.5 hours allocated with a number of insightful presentations ahead of us, with our speakers that will be covering different aspects of solar and storage deployment in Sub-Saharan Africa. We will have 5 presentations from our guest speakers, followed by a short panel discussion and a short Q&A. So while you can have a sneak peek of the agenda for the moment, I will fully introduce the speakers ahead of their presentations. Also, we would like to see your questions to the panelists. If you have any questions, please use the chatbot function on the right-hand side of your screen as illustrated in this slide. And anticipating already the most common questions, the webinar recording and all the slides will be shared with the participants at the end of the webinar. So finishing this housekeeping, I would now have the pleasure to introduce the first speaker, Chanda Nchalo, who is director at Harmattan Renewables. Chanda, I give you the floor to share with us some insights from South Africa. Please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Rafaela. Thanks. Hi to everyone on the webinar. So I know the title says views on the RMI4P, which will be the end of my presentation, but I'm just also going to go through a little bit of a discussion about what the market looks like at the at different sizes in South Africa, from residential right up to utility. So hopefully, yeah, it is working. Sorry, and I'm skipping things. So as Rafaela mentioned, I'm from Harmattan Renewables. We are a technical consultancy headquartered in Johannesburg and working across Sub-Saharan Africa. I won't go into a whole lot of detail, as you'll get the slides after, about the full services we provide, but we operate across the value chain in solar, storage, and wind, offering services to developers, lenders, and equity investors. On the storage front, we partner with a company called Clean Horizon, who are based in France, and we work closely with them using their proprietary modeling system for energy storage systems. So feel free to get in touch with us. All of the details at the end of the presentation. In terms of the growth of solar and storage in South Africa in particular, there's quite a few market drivers which I've listed on the left-hand side. The main one being the rising price of energy. So you'll see the growth in the Eskom average tariff versus inflation in the country on the right-hand side. So the annual increases in prices for electricity are pretty significant for the general population. We also have the global fall in costs of renewable energy technologies. The government is becoming much more supportive and in putting in place energy policies to allow the growth of renewables and storage, and a lot of financing programs that are available for companies to develop and access renewables technologies. I have to do a little bit of a plug for the South African PV Association. So we're working to put in place accreditation to ensure the quality of all of the installations. Other market, sorry, I keep on, it takes a little bit of a blip. In terms of policies, the other thing to note is that the major municipalities are also looking to procure power directly. So we have a monopoly system where Eskom is the major procurer of power, and Cape Town, Tshwane, and Nelson Mandela Bay, City Power, Johannesburg are all looking at private PPAs and purchasing directly from IPPs. You also have an increasing number of private offtake agreements, so wheeling between generators and willing buyers anywhere across the country. And the regulations are easing slowly, but they are easing to allow this to happen. SSEG is also growing, so rooftop installations across the country are on the uptake. All of this is the backdrop to all of this is basically South Africa's integrated resource plan, which was issued in 2019. And sorry, this is a little bit small, but you can go onto the Department of Minerals, Resources and Energy website to get the full document. So essentially what you'll see is that every year over the next few years, there's an allocated procurement of PV and wind. And then there's also on the right-hand side, 500 megawatts a year of allocation that is towards distributed generation. That is up until 2030. So there's quite a big market available for companies looking to get into the space. And the other backdrop to all of this is load shedding. So we have less supply of electricity than demand. The coal-fired power stations in the country are coming to the end of their lifetime. And so we have quite significant issues with lack of power on a regular basis, which is one of the major drivers, particularly from a residential point of view. So residential consumers are looking to have more security of supply and are transitioning to rooftop solar systems alongside storage. The graph on the left shows you the shipments, energy storage shipments by region. So you'll see that while South Africa is currently small, it's been growing as compared to countries like the United Kingdom and Spain for the residential market. In terms of size of the rooftop PV market, Green Cape, who do a lot of research in the space, estimate that it's a 125 billion rand market by the end of 2035, so quite significant. This is the slide from Sapvia, who are releasing a report in the not too distant future based on solar panel import data. So currently 1,200 megawatts installed on the SSEG scale. So about 7,000 jobs created, and the average costs that you're looking for installed are between 9 and 13 rand per watt peak. There's a little bit outdated data regarding the installation. So it's something that is a work in progress, trying to get actual figures. But the market can potentially grow up to that 500 megawatts that is under the IRP per annum. So you're looking at a total of 7.5 gigawatts installed capacity by 2035 at that average cost of about 10 rands per watt peak. So 75 billion rand market. I was also just asked to give a little bit of feedback on the Cni market, and these are just some high-level projects, recent projects and announcements. If you follow the news, there have been a lot of companies that have announced that they want to procure solar power, mainly in the mining sector. A lot of the energy-intensive users want to balance the increasing cost of power from Eskom with, and also to increase the security of supply. So the Mining Council estimates that there's about 1,600 megawatts of solar PV that's going to go online over the next 3 years in South Africa, and that is primarily for large mines. So you'll see in the bullet points at the bottom, Amazon and the Solar Group have recently announced a wheeling agreement with a 10 megawatt project. Goldfields got their generation license for a 40 megawatt project. Sasol and Anglo American are in procurement processes for between 400 and 900 megawatts between them. There's a few barriers or difficulties in this space, the primary one being the generation license that's required from the National Energy Regulator. And then the wheeling, while possible, is quite a difficult process to manage. But there is a lot of interest and growth in the Cni market as well. And then to jump onto the utility scale and the RMI4P, which really has pushed storage particularly into the forefront of everybody's minds. I'll just skip this one quickly and then go into the details. So existing storage, not just battery storage, we also have quite a significant fleet of installed CSP plants in the country, most developed with molten salt thermal storage. So I've given you some details of those on this slide for you to have a look at after. What's been happening in the storage space is that Eskom were initially given funding by the World Bank in 2010. They were meant to develop 100 megawatt CSP with storage. That was then renegotiated to having distributed storage around the country to help balance the grid. So Eskom chose the sites, specified the technologies, and launched an RFP last year for 80 megawatt 4-hour systems. There's been an update in that procurement process, and it's all on Eskom's website if you want to have a look, for 3 different tenders that have gone out for energy storage to be installed at substations around the country. So in the Western Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, and then the two other ones at the bottom are also Western Cape. The bids on that are due on the 4th of May 2021. So you can have a look. It's for design, engineering, supply, construction of BESS systems, plus 5 years of O&M services. So then RMIPP, and you saw on the initial slide with the integrated resource plan that there's a bit of a gap at the beginning of the table, and essentially there is a supply gap of around 2,000 megawatts that government needed to fill, and so launched this emergency risk mitigation procurement program. It was or is technology agnostic, and basically bidders needed to provide dispatchable, flexible generation to the grid between 5 a.m. and 9:30 p.m. and just needed to be able to respond to Eskom's requests for power. The preferred bidders were announced last month, and each of the projects has a COD long stop date of end of December 2022. So there's quite quick timelines on everything. Financial close needs to happen by the end of July of this year, and then all of the plants need to be constructed and connected to the grid within that 18-month period. The auction was initially designed, or seemed like it was designed, for gas projects, but really became an opportunity for renewables plus storage to be used as dispatchable assets. So you have a look here. with the typical solar profile, plus using storage, that you are then able to essentially oversize the renewables part of the project and then act as a dispatchable facility. I think one of the key things to understand about the RMIPP is that the storage systems are not allowed to charge from the ESCOM grid. So they need to be able to charge solely from the project facilities. The winners of the RFP are listed down below, and as you'll see, about just under 25% that actually ended up going to renewables plus storage, the bulk to the gas sector as expected, but really it's been a wonderful positive, I think, for renewables plus storage, to win so big in a program, a technology agnostic program. There's also a further 150 megawatts of projects that are under negotiation for value for money with the IPP office, and you'll see the average pricing on the right hand side. So prices ranging from just over 1400 megawatts, 1400 rand per megawatt hour to just under 1900 per megawatt hour. And so really cost competitive versus gas for the renewables and storage sector. So then beyond RMIPP, bid window 5 has just been announced, and in that there's 1,000 megawatts of PV which will be bid. Submissions are due, and sorry, this is 4th of August. Initially they said 4th, I think it's actually the 16th of August now, because there's a slight delay in the documents coming out. And what government have said is that then they want to do the rounds following to maintain some kind of stability in the market. So September of this year, there should be another 2.6 gigawatts, of which again the split should be 1,000 megawatts PV and 1,600 megawatts wind. The following auction skips out PV for a year, so that there isn't a bit space in that round 7 for PV, but alongside that there's all of the opportunities in terms of embedded generation and captive power plants. And then the other thing that is likely to happen in September and October is procurement of 500 megawatts of energy storage directly through the IPP office and DMRE. And there's no details at the minute on what that will look like in terms of sizing, but it is meant to happen towards the end of the year. So thank you. Any questions we'll take a little bit later on, but hopefully that was a useful snapshot of the South African market. Oh, you're on mute, Rafaela, I think.
Oops, thanks. I was saying thank you, Chanda, thanks also for the heads up, for the very nice presentation, and good to see the insights from the renewable energy auction in South Africa, and look forward to the next round. So from South Africa, now we move on to Zimbabwe, and I am delighted to invite Isaiah Nyakusandwa to join us for his presentation. Isaiah is the chairman of Renewable Energy Association of Zimbabwe, a renewable energy consultant, and a founder and CEO of Sulphur Energy, an energy for productive use solution provider. Isaiah, you should have now control of the slides, so I would give you the floor, please.
Thank you, Raphael, and good afternoon, everyone on the webinar. I'm from Zimbabwe, and it's always good to also take into perspective the size of Zimbabwe. After my sister, the Chanda, has given the presentation for the bigger market being South Africa. So I'll just quickly go into my presentation. Right. I think oh no. Hello? Jeez.
Yes, we can see your slides. You should be
okay. All right. Okay. All right. I think the issue is in Zimbabwe, we have a renewable energy policy that was launched in 2019, where we are trying to introduce about 1,100 megawatts of renewable energy power into the energy mix by 2025. And solar is one of the key renewable energy sources that given our solar irradiation as Zimbabwe. And that brings also into perspective the needs then for battery storage. However, in our market, when one looks at the battery storage issues, we do have distortions on battery costs. Recently, we have had a wave of duties on lithium-ion batteries, but the lead-acid batteries still attract a 20% duty. This is primarily from the background that we also have a local manufacturer, and there was the issue of the need to protect local industries. However, that's another issue for debate on another day. So our deployment of solar PV and storage has largely been in residential and CNI. However, our market is a bit of a challenge in terms of data collection. Now, Zimbabwe comes from a background where we have had a lot of power outages, a lot of load sheddings at some point in time, where we used to get about 18 hours of load shedding. And at that point in time, a lot of people invested in generators. And at this point in time, people are also migrating from those generators to solar PV and battery storage. So we have a lot of changing landscape in as far as residential is concerned, the residential market, and also the commercial and industrial sectors. And most countries in sub-Saharan Africa are moving to competitive bidding. That also includes Zimbabwe. In our renewable energy policy, that's one of the issues that is also highlighted, that we also need to move from the unsolicited bidding to competitive bidding, where we should obviously be able to see the reduction of solar PV, LOC, and LCOS. Just to then highlight the movement that has happened in Africa in as far as the movement to auctions. Got a slide there which talks about, just next for me. Right, the auctions that are spreading in sub-Saharan Africa. That gives you an indication of the countries where about 28 countries have announced the need for auction programs, with about 155 IPPs that have been awarded. And I think the bulk of these are also coming from the South African market, as you can see, and Namibia, Zambia as well, Mali up there, and then 41 IPPs are also currently in the RFP and RFP stages. It is also expected that mainly in South Africa, where there will be at least 6 IPPs in 2021. So next slide for me there. Is also, that slide gives an indication of what the cost has been over the years in terms of from 2012 to 2021 forecast. And you can see that Zambia and Namibia, as well as South Africa, have actually achieved a cost which is lower than the PV LOC SCOE indicated by IRENA of 2019. So we have about 6.3 gigawatts from 2011 to 2015 through competitive prices, 90%, 98 realization rate. Then, but mainly in South Africa, there has been not much procurements since 2015. And then there will be next rounds that are expected in 2021, an estimate of about 6.9 gigawatts. Right, next slide there. So the most interesting, trends that have happened, we have seen a lot of movement into, megawatt scale commercial and industrial tenders. In Kenya, there you've got Liquid Telecoms East Africa, data center, which is a 1 megawatt solar PV. South Africa, there's quite a number of them there, 200 megawatts solar PV. Siabanye, Stillwater, 75 megawatts solar PV, and American Goldfields. I think Chanda has already covered those as well. Vendata and Sasol and ArcelorMittal. And then 2020 auctions announcements, Seychelles 4 megawatts floating PV, Cape Verde 2 times 4, 5 megawatts solar PV, and I think the list goes on. Also Zimbabwe, we have had also an indication of tenders for about 500 megawatts also. I think if I can just move forward. Right. The most successful and interesting solar storage projects to date and the business cases, particularly now, focusing mainly on the Zimbabwean market. We have had people moving, like I mentioned earlier on, to solar PV power, wanting to manage, to move power from day to night, and then also the balancing out of PV fluctuations, which have also seen the demand for battery storage. So the sectors that are really of interest to a lot of investors at the moment is residential, Cndi, the farming community, the mining, tourism facilities, and then the telecommunications sectors. Those are the areas where we have lots of activity there. In the mining sector, tobacco, horticulture, farming, basically being those that are export hedged. So you have private sector PPAs. We have had an installation of 500 kilowatt solar system with a 500 kilowatt hour battery storage for a tobacco farmer, and also about 118 kilowatt system for with a 360 kilowatt hour battery storage for a rose farm. And then we also have had in the sector the UNDP coming in with funding for electrification of rural clinics, aggregated, that has been like 5 megawatts with also storage that has been brought as a response to energy access issues and also the need for COVID response. I can just move on. Most promising markets and projects. I think I just gave a quote there, according to IEA 2014A, where electricity for many grids can save an estimated of 140 million rural Africans by 2040 if we install, 100,000 to 200,000 mini grids, which again brings in the issue to look at, battery storage. Commercial and industrial sectors, export companies, telecommunications. One telecommunication company has actually got a pipeline of 18,590 kilowatt hour battery storage projects. And then we have also got the licensed, SPPs and IPPs. Interestingly enough, in Zimbabwe, we also have, a policy now where all buildings have to be on solar thermal. So that is also giving also an impetus to the market. Right, I think that's basically my short presentation, and I'll take questions when we get there. Thank you.
Many thanks, Isaiah, for sharing your views on Zimbabwe and the sub-Saharan African market. I understand there is quite some interesting developments also in terms of the business case and a few interesting projects coming out in the pipeline. And maybe we have the opportunity to discuss that a little bit in the panel discussion. So thank you once again. I would now invite the next speaker to join us. The next speaker is Dr. Segun Adaju, who is a leading renewable energy expert with the VRES banking background, and is also the president of the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. So Segun, welcome, and he will give us an overview of the policy framework in Nigeria. You should have control of the slides, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Rafael. Yes, precisely good afternoon from Nigeria. My name is Segun Adaju. I run a solar energy company also called Consistent Energy, and also president of the Industrial Association in Nigeria. Let me just quickly proceed to my presentation. Okay, I'm having some right. Okay, so basically the Industrial Association started sometime in 2016, and our overarching vision is to ensure the energy mix includes 40% renewables by 2030, and we do a lot of engagement with our members and industry stakeholders. The next slide. So a general overview of the macro situation of energy in Nigeria. So we have 208 million people, but the grid capacity is really very low. On the average, between 5,500 megawatts grid connection.
There seems to be a little technical issue with your connection, Segun. Are you able to hear us? Maybe if the connection is not great, you can try to turn off your screen sharing and just use the audio. It seems the problem is persisting. Let's wait a few seconds more to see if he's able to get the internet back. Segun, are you able to hear us? Because we cannot hear you. If we don't have the panelists at the moment, I would suggest that maybe we skip the presentation for the moment, and hopefully he'll be able to present afterwards. So yes, I would ask my colleagues who are in control of the slides to move on to the next presentation, if that is possible. And sorry for speeding this up. Oh, maybe actually I hear that Segun is back.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, sorry, John, for the alarm, but so Segun, I think we lost you for a moment. So if you can continue your presentation, I think I think your internet is back.
All right, thank you. Apologies for that. Please could you put on my slide, right? Okay, so and I also need some support to move my slides from your end, if possible. Next slide, please. All right, so, okay, so just talking about the huge gap that exists between demand and supply of power in Nigeria. So unarguably, Nigerian market is the biggest for solar and storage in sub-Saharan Africa, given the huge gap that exists, and also for the population size. Next slide. So currently, most people, supply, generate their own electricity through generators. And interestingly, what is produced by self-generation is almost 4 times what the national grid supplies. Okay, so this also creates, a threshold for solar and storage, because people are already used to distributed generation, and it's easy to just transition from generators to solar and battery storage. Next slide. Interestingly, also the solar irradiation in Nigeria is very good, and creates a very huge opportunity, for solar installation. And currently, the market has taken advantage of that, and there's a big, industry uptake that's going on currently in Nigeria, with both from private sector and also from government initiatives. Some of them I will share in the course of the presentation. Next slide. Okay, now talking about solar, so the 2 segments I want to speak to. One is the grid tied, and also, of course, the off-grid space. So for the grid tied, about 14 companies, independent power producers that has gotten license since 2016. However, they haven't reached financial close, also because of the issues that's affecting the grid, issues of pricing, the challenge of signing what we call puts and call option agreements, which is still outstanding. So most of the solar deployment we've seen in Nigeria in the past 4 or 5 years has been around, distributed off-grid, technologies, and virtually every one of them, comes with battery backups. For example, there's a big deployment of mini grids in Nigeria currently, and most of them also come with, battery backup. So it shows the potential that exists in this market for battery, solar and storage. Next slide. How big is the market? I've talked about this before. More than half of the population are not connected to the national grid. So the chances of getting power from the grid in another 10 years is pretty slim. And the other half, virtually majority of them have less than 4 hours, even in city centers. So that also creates that that's a window for solar and battery storage. So the off-grid market in Nigeria is very big, and like I said earlier, almost the biggest in sub-Saharan Africa by any standard. Next, please. Now, in terms of the policy framework, so right from year 2005, government has made some conscious efforts at commercializing and deregulating the market to allow private sector players, up until 2016, when the first licenses were issued. However, those licenses were not issued based on bidding or auction, but we're hoping that the next round of licenses that will be issued in Nigeria will follow that trajectory. However, most of those licenses, like I said earlier, have not reached financial close. So major focus is on distributed power, we're seeing commercial and industrial, mini grid, and even solar home systems and every one of them have some form of battery backup. Next, please. Right, so captive generation, let me focus on that, also has been very, well, developed in Nigeria. So we're seeing solar for large, industrial, complex. For example, there's a 650 kilowatt peak that a major bureau in Nigeria, funded by Cross Boundary, has just commissioned, and we're seeing many of such around large industrial, outfits in Nigeria. Next, please. Then several of the policy frameworks. So one thing about Nigeria is government has also done pretty very well by providing several policy frameworks that has encouraged the development, the deployment, and also the rollout of the solar projects in Nigeria. I mean, one of the recent ones is what we call the mini grid policy of 2016, which has created a lot of window for many investors to come into the market. The policy is seen as one of the best around in this region, with some countries, especially in the West African region, trying to benchmark those policy framework. So we also have the rural electrification strategy and implementation plan that is also supervising and overseeing the rollout of projects across educational institutions in Nigeria, markets, industries, and basically using solar PV with storage. Next slide. Now, so a brief round of some of the other policies. I've mentioned the mini grid policy. Then there's also the Nigerian Energy Efficiency Action Plan of 2014. We have the National Policy on Climate Change of 2013. Also what we call the National Renewable Energy Action Plan up to the Sustainable Energy for All agenda of 2016. So there are several policy frameworks in Nigeria that has created that enabling environment for investors to come in, and so we're seeing even private sector going to mini grid development, raising private finance rather than relying on solely grants and development funds. So the market potential, for example, in mini grid is estimated to be between 8,000 to 10,000 commercially viable sites all over Nigeria, with other report done by the GIZ. And then the Rural Electrification Agency in Nigeria is pushing at the frontiers in ensuring these sites are assessed and developed with, potential grant funding opportunity under the Nigerian Electrification Project, totaling about $550 million from the World Bank and African Development Bank. So this is creating a buzz in the markets, and most of the, solar is the leading technology in Nigeria on renewables, and with battery, storage also infused in projects that are implemented. Next slide. So we're seeing the future of what energy looks like in Nigeria. So residential household also is a big market. Most of the deployment we've also seen in the last couple of years has been around household. Like I said, there are huge numbers of generators all over the place. Some estimated over 40 million units. I think that should be the highest anywhere in Africa, if not the world. So that also has created, like I said, the platform for particularly distributed solar PV and battery storage to come in. So rural communities, mini grids being deployed, urban residential houses, we're seeing rooftops springing up, we're seeing SMEs being powered by solar with batteries, and then also, like I said, mini grid. Next slide. So this is a mini grid in somewhere north central part of Nigeria by one of our members, GV project. That seems to be the leading developer of mini grid in this region. Also funded, from various, opportunities and schemes, including the Rural Electrification Agency, grant funding. There's a result-based financing model that has also, encouraged deployment of this solution. I also want to mention that this is also backed with some battery backup and storage. Next slide. And this is, city center of Abuja, housing complex completely not connected to national grid and totally powered mainly by solar, including solar thermal and some small units of wind, powered by one of our members, Blue Camel, we call Blue Camel Energy, and then it has battery storage. So, and it's completely off grid. It's been in operation for almost 6 years, if I'm correct, showing the opportunities and the kind of market we're seeing in Nigeria. Next, please. Then, interestingly, this is a generator company in Nigeria that's been in the space for many years, and today there's a 210 kilowatt peak, over the plant in Ikeja. That's a city center of Lagos also. So showing, the trend in terms of what we're seeing in the markets in Nigeria. Next, please. We're also seeing a lot of gas stations, deploying solar with battery backup. This is a facility also in Lagos that generates averagely 95,702 kilowatt hour per year, with about 238 solar panels on the roof that powers the pumping machines, the fuel pumps, the supermarket that is in there, and then has almost displaced the generator that is being used, and it's been running for over 4 years, if I'm correct, and it also has a battery backup. Next, please. Right, so we're seeing this revolution in Nigeria taking place. Of course, there are a couple of issues that I feel during question and answer time we might be able to talk about. These are around policy. Is it adequate enough? What are the issues? What are the constraints? Why such a huge market? Why haven't we seen much more deployment? And I'll be happy to take those questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Many thanks, Segun, for sharing your insights from Nigeria, and good to see that there are different applications that are already a reality, actually. So thanking you, I would like to introduce the next speaker, who is John Shija, Finance and Sales Manager, Africa at VRES. John will share with us some consideration from the point of view of the European solar developer. John is responsible for all commercial matters relating to projects on the continent, including PPAs and debt and equity restructuring. John, I look forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Rafaela. Let me just make sure I have control. Okay, there we go. Thanks, Rafaela. As I said, I work for VRES, and we are a very interesting company. We're EPC / project developer as well, and we operate across a number of markets throughout the world, mainly in Europe, the Americas, and the APAC region, as well as Africa, of course. Africa-wise, we are primarily focused on a number of key markets, namely Kenya, Zambia, South Africa, Morocco, and Egypt. And we tend to operate across the entire value chain in this respect, from site analysis, turnkey construction, purchasing and procurement, project finance, and project structuring, as well as PPAs. That's where we believe we add a lot of value. And yeah, with that in mind, I was asked to speak to the perspective of a developer and maybe talk to you about a case study that we have recently commissioned. As you'll see with this slide, from a storage deployment perspective, 2020 just didn't seem like a great year in terms of the African region, and the African region would fall in this respect under the MEARC, which is Middle East, Africa, Russia, and Caspian region. As you can see, the Americas and Asia Pacific are the dominant regions where there's deployment of storage. And forecasting wise, as you can see on the right side of the slide, it doesn't appear that Africa is going to be a big player with respect to storage in going forward, which is a bit disheartening. But when you look at it from when you look at it from a PV perspective, you see that gradually the numbers are starting to pick up with respect to PV. There's a gradual increase in the amount of deployment that's occurred. It's still clearly small compared to what's happening across different regions and countries across the globe, but nonetheless, it is encouraging to think of it in that way. What this leads me to think about is, in the context of, the issues that we constantly hear about with respect to grid reliability, the intermittency of PV, the concerns that regulators and authorities have with that respect, the gradual deployment of PV, you kind of have to assume that if we're going to solve this, the problems that we generally have seen, we're going to have to find some solutions such as storage. So for me, my perspective, I think it's fair to assume that there will be a gradual increase in the deployment of storage on the continent as well. Which was disheartening in that report. I do think that one can assume or can genuinely believe that there will be an uptake if we're going to solve some of those issues. Yeah, as such, I was asked to discuss some of the considerations that we would typically use to look at, whether we typically look at when we're deciding what project to go with. And in this respect, I split it into 4 things. It's not a numerous clausus. There are other aspects that I'm sure people may value more, but these are some of the things that came off the top of my head in the context of us trying to develop projects from a PV and storage perspective. And from the first one, it's location, I suppose, and I put country risk there, but I suppose that would only to some extent really matter to the extent that you are negotiating with a sort of state-owned entity type of off-taker, or you have a sovereign involved in that project. Then you'd look at the country risk. To the extent that you're dealing with a commercial and industrial client, country risk may factor in to some extent, but it's probably not the biggest factor that you would probably be a really important consideration in this respect is your land. Do you have access to land, and can you secure it for the entirety of the project life, and probably a bit more if you want to extend the life of the project as well. Also quality of the site, because you're going to be installing modules and panels on the site, and so you want to make sure that the site is appropriate to handle that. Interconnection availability is also something I suppose you would also consider, although that's it's a big factor only if you're in front of the meter. If you're behind, less so, of course. Other factors, project development, and this I suppose to some extent is linked to the legal requirements. So, from a permitting situation, can you get those relatively easily? And this links, I suppose, to the regulatory environment, which is is it transparent and clear such that you're able to make an easy enough decision as to whether to approach the situation or not. And then finally, the 4th point, I suppose, on the slide is with respect to the PPA. Can you get one? This is your revenue document, of course, and so you want to make sure that it's bankable. In some countries, we're seeing markets are shifting to more auction type systems. Are you going to be still getting take or pay PPAs, or are you going to be now dealing with take and pay PPAs? And you want to understand all of that before you make a decision. Suppose involved in that revenue document, of course, is your tariff, because that's literally how you're going to generate your revenue, and then determine if you're able to, after of course, deducting all your costs and finance costs, etc., whether you're able to meet your hurdle rates and meet your investor requirements. So these are some of the things that, of course, we would typically look at. But I was also asked, what would be the things that we'd like to see improved, and I came across this poll, which basically looked to determine. The question was whether regulation would impede or support the development of energy storage in Africa, and 71% of the pollsters said that it would. And I'm minded to agree with this thinking, and not just for for storage, but also for PV. I think we operate in single buyer markets for the most part across the continent, and that does mean that you want to be able to understand the environment that you're operating within, because from a storage perspective, I suppose you want to know how you're going to monetize it. Is frequency regulation going to be permitted? Is arbitrage going to be permitted? Is balancing going to be permitted, or shifting? And you want to understand what rules will apply, and how you will for those services that you may provide. And similarly, from a PV perspective, you also, in the context of, for instance, South Africa, the wheeling situation, there is regulations that provide for it, but they're very complex and it's very difficult to get it across the line. So does that mean, there's room and scope to improve that regulatory situation in order to make it more attractive and more easy to implement such projects? Absolutely, I think so. So I would, absolutely, I agree with this wholeheartedly, that regulation is, something that we would like to see improved across the continent in order to just make changing my slide. Sorry, my slide seems to be slow. Okay. Having discussed all the the previous things, it may seem a bit it may seem a bit depressing, but that's actually not the case. I do think that there are, and sorry, my slides are a bit slow in moving, but I'll continue to speak. I do think that there are. I was actually trying to get back to the previous slide, if possible. The previous one.
It should be fine now.
No, the previous, this one, perfect. There are offshoots of so the one with the picture of the mine.
Number 11, I think.
Yeah. Well,
it's 2 slides back.
Anyway,
Correct.
I'll keep speaking. Yeah, this one. There are offshoots of hope, and we saw this with the Fekala gold mine, our partner Suntrace in Mali. It's the world's largest off-grid solar battery hybrid system. As you can see, the figures there, it's 30 megawatt PV plant, 15 megawatt hours, 17.3 megawatt battery system, and we've been able to reduce the number of gensets, HFO gensets that were used during the day. It's projects like this that show that with the right thinking and the right strategy, you can get successful hybrid or PV and storage projects across the continent, although it is difficult. Some key benefits relating to, and I suppose I'll go to the next slide at this point. I've already pressed it, so hopefully it'll come up soon enough. Just talking to that project, there's some learnings and experiences that we got out of that, and some, I'll continue to discuss. It's a very robust system. It is able to manage ramping ups and ramping down concerns that were previously there. It operates seamlessly, and we're quite happy with the way that it's functioning. It was a system that was essentially custom made for this thermal plant, and that in itself brings a few complexities. And we're finding that again, from a seamlessness and a robustness perspective, it's operating optimally, which is something that we're very proud of. And we feel that while it may appear to be a difficult exercise and it may put a lot of people off, it is worth it at the end, because you do achieve some really amazing things. And as I said, one of them is the massive savings that we've achieved with respect to heavy fuel oil consumption on the site. Obviously, there were challenges that we experienced, and this is always going to happen. It's in a remote location, so your spare parts management is going to be very important in handling. It's going to be very important simply because if something is destroyed or goes missing, or something happens, you need to make sure that you're able to solve that problem really quickly. And in some instances, flying in spare parts may have to be the issue, may be the solution. Heat and dust, you need to mitigate this appropriately, and these are things that you start thinking about at the design stage in order to make sure that you solve some of these problems. You're still going to, of course, some issues on site, but it's going to have to be thought of very early in the stage. For instance, your HVAC in this instance is not the one that you would use in say Norway. You're going to have to obviously apply different standards and make sure that it's able to handle whatever's thrown at it. Commissioning, there were some timing considerations in terms of the assumptions that were used for the timing, but you have to be flexible in how you deal with some of these problems. I'll deal with forecasting in the next slide, which is an interesting little story about that. But fundamentally, oh no, please go back to the previous slide. Fundamentally, what we figured out coming out of this is that there are major opportunities in this respect. Outside of the savings, which are significant, and those savings are even more significant now because by virtue of incorporating the battery into the PV plant, we're able to size the PV plant much at a bigger size, allowing for the optimal operation of the gensets, but also allowing for from the PV plant. But to the extent that there were clouds or emergencies, the battery energy storage system is able to come in seamlessly and compensate and handle any issues that may have arisen. The other other applications that were there, for instance, smoothing applications that we've incorporated, load shifting applications that we've also incorporated previously. Some gensets would have to run idle for certain applications at the plant, and these are things that are not necessarily needed anymore because we have a battery energy system. And so there's a lot of opportunity to incorporate a number of interesting technical solutions in order to take the PV and storage agenda forward. And this applies to not only just large scale projects, but off-grid projects such as mines. This could be in countries as we've seen in South Africa and in Kenya, where I think there was a study last year done with respect to considering the application of battery energy storage systems. So the opportunities are great, and we think it's something that should be considered by a lot of people. This is obviously a very technical topic, and so what I've done is that the project manager, I've included his details at the end of this presentation. So if anyone has some really, really technical questions about this, he's more than happy to have a discussion with you. Could you go to the next slide just quickly, and I'll just to talk through this last point, and this is one of the challenges that we experienced. As you can see, this is with respect to forecasting. What we had done is we had installed an infrared camera, which would analyze cloud coverings and basically make a determination as to how output will be affected going forward. And what we had to recognize is that birds would also consider this to be a very comfortable resting space. And so instead of the infrared system concluding that this was a bird, it concluded that this was a cloud. And so, these are some of the issues that you need to be cognizant of and come up with novel and small, solutions in order to get, the best out of your project. And so we found that it's been, a very exciting journey, and we're excited about the opportunities going forward. Thank you very much. I think that brings it to the end.
John, many thanks for sharing your insights from developer's point of view and this interesting case study in Mali. I would now introduce our next and last speaker, so last but not least, who is Mark Hankins, GET.invest Finance Catalyst Advisor. Mark has 30 years of experience in the field of solar energy and rural electrification as an engineer, trainer, auditor, and consultant. And he's a specialist in development of off-grid solar markets with an understanding of different technologies and solutions, as well as appliances and use issues. Mark will present an overview of business cases for energy storage in the region, drivers and challenges for market development, and also will present the GET.invest Finance Catalyst. Mark, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rafael, and thank you, SolarPower Europe, for inviting me to this meeting. So I'm with GET.invest, and so I'm representing GET.invest. Can I let's see if it changes for me. Can I ask the yeah, there it is. So GET.invest is so I'm with GET.invest, and GET.invest is a European Union funded group that supports market development of solar projects in Africa. I'll come back to that. So can I move to the next slide, please? I'm going to do an introduction. Back one slide. Yeah, I'm going to do an introduction to GET.invest. I'll talk about the business cases. I'll talk a little bit about the regulatory frameworks and drivers and challenges for the market support, and then I'll say a little bit about how anyone that's interested can get support from the GET.invest Finance Catalyst. To begin with, I'd say having been in solar in Africa for my entire career, 30 years. I'm very, very optimistic. In the last few years, we've seen the biggest changes in solar markets. So the opportunities are really growing, especially in Africa, rapidly. It was great to hear Segun from Nigeria, because we've been talking about Nigeria for 20 years, and suddenly Nigeria has solar has become low cost enough that Nigeria now can jump into solar and get in the fast lane. So it's very exciting times, and having been in this for 30 years, things are really picking up now. Next slide, please. So I'll talk about GET.invest. So GET.invest, we are a European program, and I'm a financial advisor. And so we support decentralized renewable energy projects in Africa and the Caribbean. And so we kind of act as a catalyst. So there's many great projects out there, many great entrepreneurs, and there's a lot of money available. And the problem for a lot of the entrepreneurs is they don't know how to get the money. And the problem for the people, the investors, is they can't find good projects. So we at GET.invest try and connect the two. So I work with a team of 25 people, and we provide pro bono support to projects so that they can do their business, and which is developing the solar markets, and we can help them find investment to grow their projects. So I'll come back to that later on, but we provide advice, We work with private sector mobilization, supporting events like this, and then we do capacity development and studies. So could we move to the next slide, please? So looking at business case for off-grid energy storage. So yeah, I'm going to talk about storage, not so much solar markets. This is intimately connected to solar markets, but the first business case is off-grid energy storage, and we have seen. We have been working in East Africa, where I'm based. I'm coming to you from Nairobi. We've been doing off-grid energy storage for decades, and this has been the primary market. Before solar went on grid, solar has been off grid. So the traditional established market is standalone systems. We are seeing developing markets with mini grids and embedded and off-grid systems in mining and tourism. And the future that we're looking at is electric transport, and that's going to be off-grid and on-grid. So off-grid market developments have been dominated by private sector finance programs. So we've seen over $1 billion invested in PAYGO, very small scale off-grid markets. So that involves very small pieces of storage. But the larger pieces of storage in the schools, clinics, humanitarian areas, solar is rapidly replacing generators, and the finance for this is dominated by grant, and we're moving into a little bit more private sector market oriented support for these, but so far it's mostly been donors and governments. And private sector opportunities are emerging and becoming viable quickly as technology improves, costs decrease, and finance models open up. So technology has changed a lot in the last 5 years. Costs of solar rocketed down, cost of storage is rocketing down, but the big one is financial models opening up. The off-grid solar for the base of the pyramid didn't really grow quickly until the PAYGO finance models opened up. So financiers are now looking at ways to figure out how to help customers pay for their off-grid energy supplies, and this is changing everything. So I think keep your eye on the finance models, because that's going to drive the development of the market. Next slide, please. Okay, business case 2 is a grid connect market. So we look at for storage, we look at the off-grid markets have been the meat and potatoes, but grid connect markets are opening up. And it's really important that when we look at grid connect markets, that we look at them in a way to understand how they're going to develop. They are evolving very rapidly. We didn't have discussions about grid connect storage markets, solar and storage markets 3, 4, 5 years ago. Now we are having discussions. So where are these markets going to develop? Well, the first one is in the Cni sector, power stabilization. So we aren't talking about storing huge amounts of power. What we're talking about is having a battery on the consumer side of the meter, and that battery helps them to keep their equipment operating on days when the grid is very unstable. So in East Africa, in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, we have very unstable power. So if we have a battery, that battery, and it can be a small battery, it doesn't have to be huge, can help stabilize power, and that can make the Cni solar or wind work. So the first step is power stabilization, and these are not huge battery systems. These are relatively small battery systems that work with an inverter to ensure that if the power goes unstable or off for 5 minutes, the solar can continue to do its job. The next one is Cndi short-term storage, and this is where you're talking a few hours of storage for markets where the grid is unstable and they need several hours of storage to keep things going. You can see the picture of an oil company that makes cooking oil in Nakuru. So short-term power storage is a little bit, you need more battery than you do for just stabilization, and a lot of factories are beginning to look at this, especially as we move to new technologies. So another very important market, and I think we heard it from South Africa, and we heard it from Nigeria, is the small business and residential. A lot of small businesses and residentials are just totally fed up with the high cost of electricity, the unreliability of electricity. So they say, I just want to have my solar, and I want to have a power wall, or I want to have a battery and storage system, so I can have I can run my TV, I can have my communication and my security, and I'll just pay for it. This is becoming reality in countries like Kenya and Uganda. It's been the case for Somalia for decades. So small business and residential, this is a market that is opening up rapidly, and very few companies have been able to package and finance the systems in the smaller sizes that are required. But this is a much more profitable business than, say, running pay-go for base of the pyramid. So small business and residential for upper middle class and business needs is going to be very important. And I'll say it again, transport. We are beginning to see businesses pop up all over East Africa, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, that are serving the electric transport market needs. It's no, 3 years ago to see an electric car, an electric vehicle, electric border motorcycle was unheard of. Now we are beginning to see them. So we're getting towards that first 1%, and governments are beginning to see that this is a way forward to green, and companies are beginning to say, hey, solar is actually cheaper than fuels. So transport is going to be very intimately connected with the development of the storage market. Next slide, please. Regulatory issues. In a lot of countries in Africa, we don't have regulation. So for Kenya, for example, which has installed 100 megawatts of Cni solar in the last 3 years, there's no horizon for net metering or wheeling, though it's in the Energy Act, but it hasn't been implemented. It hasn't been actioned yet by governments. So Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, most of the East Africa countries, their net metering is not really on the cards. South Africa has wheeling, but the net metering and wheeling will not be tools that can be used by companies to help make the use of storage more profitable. Any private sector that wants to come into these countries is going to have to realize that it's going to have to work with the government to develop regulation and exemptions. It's a long-term process. Usually the private sector is ahead of the government in development of regulations. And so the private sector has to move hand in hand with the government to get the right regulations in place. Some tax exempt environments, but a lot of the issues that will make storage profitable are going to take quite a bit of discussion with government. So in Kenya, they just removed the VAT exemption for solar, and there's no time soon where they're going to allow VAT exemptions for battery storage. So it's a difficult sell for policymakers. It's going to take some time. I believe we'll get there, but duty exemption and tax breaks for batteries are not necessary in place in a lot of countries. I think Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, they do have exemptions. Kenya, which is the biggest market, it doesn't have that exemption. It was recently removed. So regulatory issues will continue to be a headache, and any company that wants to play in these markets has got to deal with regulatory issues. Next slide, please. When we look at the drivers for market development, this is really exciting. The drivers, the falling prices for storage. So, you know, the talk of battery storage reaching $100 per kilowatt hour, this was not possible, but we've reached $137 per kilowatt hour in 2020. So we are, storage prices are dropping as fast as solar prices are. So falling prices are going to drive new markets. So this is a niche market field. So small companies, there are a lot of niche markets that are gonna open up. Every time the price of batteries goes down a little bit, it's gonna become a little bit interesting for another segment of the market. So when you have a new market opened up, there's increased demand, and then government begins to pay a little bit more attention to it. So you have better regulatory infrastructure, and you have a virtuous circle, and that drives falling prices again. So as happened in solar and other countries, I think with battery storage, we're going to see falling prices drive better regulatory infrastructure. Battery technologies, so far we are mostly still lead acid in East Africa. Lithium ion is a lot of the installations being done are now lithium ion. You know, in the big installations are lithium ion almost exclusively now, and we're even seeing capacitor-based batteries beginning to come in. So the technology is changing. We're getting a lot of very much better choices for what technology we can use. This is very exciting, and of course, the solar PV market development is driving the whole demand for better storage. So the drivers are very strong. Falling prices in storage is going to open up a lot of doors. Next slide, please.
Mark, sorry to interrupt. If you can wrap up your presentation, so that we can have a Q&A afterwards. Thank you.
Right. So the challenges are technical capacity. Companies don't have the skills to deal with batteries. Market awareness and confidence in the technology is still quite low. Financing for businesses to build and financing for consumers, this is a key need. And government regulations, as I already mentioned, and grid acceptance of power is not there yet. So these challenges will remain, but we're getting over them. Last slide. So finance catalyst, if there are people out there who are entrepreneurs and they're looking to get support to help them identify finance in their companies, then the way to go about it, one more slide forward. If you're interested, please go to our website, and we evaluate applications once a month. So please, you can submit your application to www.GET.invest EU Finance Catalyst Access, and your application will be evaluated within a week. So we respond very quickly, and it's quite easy to get an advisor to help your company or your project identify finance if you fit within our parameters. So that's my talk. Last slide. So please feel free to get in touch with me if you want to find out more about the Finance Catalyst. And I think we are going to see a lot more investment in solar and storage, especially in East Africa. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mark. And I think it was very interesting for our audience to know about the finance catalyst and to understand what are the business cases available on grid, off grid for solar plus storage. And also thanks for the positive message. So we're almost at the end of the webinar, but I would like to ask to all the speakers to put on their cameras for a quick Q&A. We have a few questions that have popped up. And my suggestion is that we start over from the first speaker to the last. So I would start with a question for Chanda. What considerations, they ask, do people need to think about when entering the South African market, especially within round 5 and 6 of the renewable energy auctions? If you can address this in a few sentences, thank you.
Okay, it's a big question. I'm not sure if you sentences, but I think round 5 and 6. So the documents are available on the IPP office website. You need to pay 25,000 Rand to get them. Read the documents. Bidding processes in South Africa are pretty prescriptive. So just be able to fulfill all of their criteria and make sure all of the boxes are checked in your submissions. I think a big part of the changes for the new round 5 documents, there's quite stringent requirements in terms of BEE, which is Black Economic Empowerment. So you need to find a local partner to participate both in the SPV plus construction plus O&M side of things. And then from a more technical point of view, which I look at, there's requirements in terms of you have to have basically a fully developed project from the beginning. You can bid wind up to 140 megawatts, solar up to 75 megawatts, but the projects need to be able to be constructed within 24 months from financial close. So I think when you're looking at projects for acquisition, just take that into account in terms of negotiations with Eskom and being able to build grid connections. I'll stop there because I could probably go on for a while. But those are maybe key ones.
Thank you very much. Then now let's move on to a question to Isaiah. You mentioned local manufacturing in your presentation. So do you think local manufacturing is a solution for the promotion of battery storage in sub-Saharan Africa, and how we can promote this further?
Thank you, Raphael. Local promotion only works if money is put into research and development. Otherwise, you will actually be very uncompetitive when one compares with the changes that are happening in technology, as far as technology is concerned. So there is need for governments to also start looking at investment in that area. Otherwise, we risk the the danger of actually shortchanging citizens in as far as better products that come in from other markets. So yeah, that's my comment on that one.
Thank you. So let's move on to Segun for a question on Nigeria. You presented the overall policy framework for solar. And what do you think, in your view, are the biggest policy constraints for development of solar and storage in Nigeria? Is it regulation for storage specifically? What are your views on that?
All right, thank you so much. So we're seeing the market, taking some shape in Nigeria, just like Mark also mentioned. But also some policy constraints that we're facing are also around the issues of tax and import charges. So for example, batteries attract about 20%. Sometime, I think 2 years ago, government pulled out a gazette to say solar panels would begin to attract 5% charge plus VAT when the common external tariff in West Africa kicked in. Okay, so that's also been a challenge. I mean, we're doing a market study currently, and we're finding out that the final cost to the end users increased by about 30%, because of some of these charges that are imposed by customs, by Federal Inland Revenue Service, and the rest. Okay, so but we were making conscious effort to see how we can prove through some financial model to show that in the long run, where energy access is created, there will be more jobs, increase in productivity, increase in gross domestic product, and then further revenues will accrue to government beyond the exemption they have given. So that's what we're trying to prove now. So basically, the issues around incentives and taxes that are imposed on both solar and storage.
Thank you very much. And maybe to conclude with the two speakers that have more of a regional overview, I would ask the same question to both of you, and maybe John, you go first, and Mark, you follow. And this is a question that is also asked by many people in the Q&A. So, what are the markets that offer the best opportunity for investment in solar and storage in the future? So, what do you think are the rising stars within 5-10 years from now?
I'll maybe try that first. I suppose I think you need to go with the obvious one, although there's debate in this one with respect to whether it's an actual race to the bottom. But South Africa, I think, would be a very strong contender there, simply because the regulatory environment's there, and the IRP's out, and they are actually tendering. And so, if you're looking at utility scale government-backed projects, that's certainly a market to consider. It's also a strong market when you think about it in the context of Cni. There are many mining clients out there that we speak to that are very interested in sourcing opportunities that could, reduce or stabilize their electricity bill. And then, I would say that, well, outside of South Africa, Morocco, Egypt are probably great opportunities. Morocco more probably than Egypt, and then finally, once Kenya resolves its PPA issues with respect to the review that's currently undergoing there, I think there's certainly scope there to make it work. This is just my sense. There's definitely other markets that could catapult forward. But yeah, that if you're looking for certainty and comfort, those are probably the markets I would initially start looking at.
Mark, what are your thoughts on this?
John was talking about geographic. Let me talk about product and market categories, because if you're interested in the PPA category, Africa, but if you're interested in markets that are on the other side of the meter, then there are Cni and household and small business and transport. I think if you want to sell storage systems, then you need to think like Tesla for Africa, because in Kenya you'll be lucky to get one PPA deal, but there are 20 companies operating in the Cni space now, and there off-grid. Mkopa Solar has 200,000 customers that are base of the pyramid customers. If we can move into the household and small business customer and try and supply them with power the way our Segun from Nigeria was speaking, that's a huge market. So I look at market categories. I say that whoever can crack the middle class small business power supply market, that's a market that hasn't been cracked yet, and to me that would be very interesting to develop. You don't have to worry about PPA agreements with government. What you're doing is you're selling products and finance agreements to customers.
Many thanks. Looking at the schedule, we are a bit beyond our allocated time. I would like to continue this conversation. There's much to discuss with all of you, but because of time's sake, I would suggest to close the session today. So I would like, first of all, to thank all the speakers for sharing the views and the insights with us. We have I think we learned a lot in terms of business case viability, key barriers and drivers, considerations about future investment opportunities, and so on. I would also like to thank our partner, GET.invest, once again for the support given for the organization of this webinar, and thank all of you for your attention and interest in this exciting topic. I see that a few questions that have been asked in the chat were a bit specific to some of the panelists, so I would invite you to reach out to them bilaterally. All email addresses are available in the slide, so you'll be able to do so. So with this, I thank you all again, and I wish you a pleasant rest of the day. Hope to see you at our next events. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.